In today's video, I'm going to share with you the exact strategy that I use every single day that made me over $32,000 last week trading. I'm going to share with you my full trading process from the strategy that I use to the setups that I take, and then I'm going to take you through a full realistic week of live trading, showing you my wins and losses. So with that being said, let's not waste any time and let's get straight into the video. Alrighty, so as you can see, I have my trading statistics pulled up for the first week of November. And as you can see, I've made in total over $32,000, 62% win rate, profit factor 5.5, day win percentage of 100%, and an average win to loss ratio of 3.31R. So as you can see right here, this is my PNL graph and this is my PNL calendar. And as you can see, I made $32,000 last week trading. In today's video, I'm going to share with you the exact step-by-step process on exactly what I was looking for coming into market open. And then of course, I'm going to be sharing with you all my trades, my wins and losses that I took throughout the week. And then of course, I'm going to be showing you guys my live trading session at the very end of the video as well. So with that being said, let's go on to exactly what I look for and the criteria that I have coming into market open. So as you can see, every single day when I come into the markets, I'm looking for primarily these four things. Number one, I'm looking for names with lots of momentum / continuation. What does this mean? We want to be trading names with momentum. The reason being is because when we enter in and we specifically trade stocks or we trade options, we want speed. Since speed is very key, especially when you're trading options or you're trading any single individual name, you want price to gravitate towards your levels very quick. You don't want to be sitting in a trade where there's a lot of drawdown, where you have a lot of chop or consolidation. As soon as we enter, we want speed and momentum, and we want the name to gravitate towards our profit targets quickly. And that also ties into continuation. Whenever you have continuation, that's where you make majority of your money. We don't like to trade in ranges. We like to trade when price is essentially trending and when we have continuation above our key levels. Next, what we're going to be looking for is names with high volume. When we have high volume in the markets, that usually creates the best opportunities. When there's low volume, that usually means there's less opportunity because higher volume means more buyers and more sellers. And this brings me to my third point, which is needing volatility and liquidity. When there's a lot of volume, generally speaking, there's going to be a lot of volatility and liquidity. The good thing about having a lot of volatility is that there's going to be plenty of different opportunities. If you miss the first opportunity, usually there's going to be another opportunity. So that's what's great about having a lot of volatility in the markets. You can trade it up, you can trade it down. And when there's a lot of liquidity in the markets, you don't have to worry about sizing or getting filled because the spreads are going to be tight and you don't have to worry about slippage. And then finally, what we're looking for is primarily trending stocks. And what we also have here is what's called stocks in play, which primarily means that we have some sort of news catalyst. You always see the best opportunities in the markets will come when stocks have news catalysts. So there's a reason for price to move. And usually the best moves have strong news catalysts. And that's when you have basically everything that's combined in what I mentioned earlier, right? When we have nice trends, when we have a lot of volatility, high volume, lots of momentum, that's basically what's called in play. When a stock is in play, then that's a good sign of there's going to be lots of opportunity. When there's nothing in play, then you want to be more hands off and you want to be more cautious. So right there, I just talked about what we want to look for in the charts, and you might be a little bit confused. So I'm going to show you a chart example to really help illustrate what this will look like in real time. So right here, you can see we're on the daily chart and we're on AMD. And as you can see for AMD, ever since 2024, we've been in a clear downtrend on AMD, whereas the markets, generally speaking, have been rising towards our all-time highs. We started basing earlier in April, and we started having a very nice uptrend in the markets, right? We started seeing that daily chart curl, started breaking structure. There's more positive news catalysts on AMD that really drove price higher. Also with the whole AI infrastructure theme, along with semis being fairly hot. But as you can see right here, we started basing in August, September, and October. And what happened in this case? So as you can see, we have this huge gap up in the markets. So we have this big gap up, and now we're starting to gravitate back up and towards our all-time highs. Whenever you have this big of a gap up in the markets, what is the primary primary cause. The primary cause is some sort of news event in the markets. In this case, in October, we had a very bullish news event where AMD ended up partnering with OpenAI, and we had almost a 30% gap up in the markets. So automatically, we are very bullish and we can expect continuation higher. So we have a positive news catalyst, which now increases the volatility and liquidity into the markets. And as you can see right here, the average volume in September and October was fairly low, but all of a sudden we have a huge spike. We have a huge spike in volume that is due to the news catalyst. And what does that create? That creates a lot of opportunity and liquidity into the markets. So once this occurs, now AMD is in play. So you can see almost every single day after we had that news event, now AMD is essentially in play and we can be looking for trades towards the upside. So really the past couple of weeks to a month, AMD, we've primarily looking for long positions. Of course, there have been a few shorts, but primarily the trades have been towards the upside, and it's presented some really nice A+ opportunities just because of what I mentioned earlier. So we have the stock that's in play because of the news catalyst. It's starting to trend higher. You can see built by these higher highs, higher lows in the markets. So we're starting to trend. We have a news catalyst. We have lots of volume. We have liquidity and volatility in the markets. Now AMD is going to be one of our main names to watch moving forward. So hopefully that cleared up a few things in regards to what we look for on a daily basis. If you want more examples, I do this every single morning in my pre-market prep on YouTube for absolutely free. Every single morning at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I go over exactly my game plan and what I look for every single day. So if you want to join that, I do that every single morning and you can come and watch. So what is the strategy and system? So I just talked about really the criteria and what we look for when looking for names coming into market open, but how are we able to capture these names and what is the system and strategy that I personally use? So essentially the strategy and system that I use is really looking for a classic continuation setup. Really all I'm looking for is a clear uptrend in the markets, and I'm looking for this key pivot high to turn into essentially support. So we have a clear level of resistance. We break structure towards the upside. Now I'm essentially looking for the retest off of this previous level of resistance, now turning to support. And now I'm looking for continuation towards the upside. And of course, the exact same thing applies to the downside. If we break underneath, we retest this level, we can be looking for a continuation lower. So essentially what I'm looking for is a clear trend towards the upside, or I'm looking for a clear trend towards the downside. Of course, it doesn't always look like this perfectly. That's why I'm going to show you a bunch of examples and all the trades that I ended up taking. But really, it's as simple as that. I'm just looking for previous levels of support that turn into resistance and resistance that turn into support. And with that being said, I'm going to show you all the trades I ended up taking last week. I'm going to show you my sizing, how I scaled, and of course, we're going to hop onto the charts, and then I'm going to go onto a few live sessions as well. So let's go on to trades that I took on Monday. Okay, so we're on our first day here, which is Monday, November the 3rd. I ended up making over $8,700 on this day. Let's go on to the trades that I ended up taking. As you can see, I took two trades on this day. One was a winner, one was a loser. The winner was on Tesla. I ended up making $10,000 on this name. Traded 30 contracts, net ROI 32%, adjusted cost $31,000. My stop loss on this one was 9.5 on the contracts. And what matters in this case is the risk amount. So I ended up risking close to $3,000 on this trade for a realized R multiple of 3.62. My setups in this case was a pre-market high break and retest along with its order block as well. These are my executions as you can see here. Also have my broker executions posted down below as well. And for the other trade I ended up taking, which was on NVDA, I ended up losing $1,600 on this one. Ended up losing close to 10% with a stop loss around 2.9 on the contracts, risking around $2,000 on this trade, and the setup ended up being a previous day high reclaim. So now let's go into the charts to see exactly what I was looking for. All right, so you can see we're on my first trade here. This is on NVIDIA, and on the higher time frames, I am fairly bullish on this ticker. You can see we ended up having this push originally towards the downside, but we ended up having this really solid push higher, and now you can see we're in a very clear uptrend. We're creating a flag pattern here on the hourly chart. So coming into market open on Monday, I am fairly bullish. I'm looking for the hold above now. It's going to be your Friday's highs for a push up and towards your all-time highs. So I'm simply looking for the break flag pattern and now push back back up and towards our all-time highs. And if we go into the lower time frames, as you can see, this is what my trade thesis looked like. I wanted to see the break above our previous day high for that continuation up and towards our all-time highs. Ultimately, on the lower time frames, I ended up getting stopped out. Just a lot of consolidation within the first really couple hours of market open. You can see basically the entry was the break above. I wanted to see a continue push higher with a stop just to break below. Ultimately, you can see ended up failing, ended up stopping out. Never look for a re-entry, but as you can see, the overall higher time frame thesis was correct. But in this case, the markets were fairly slow, and I ended up getting stopped out before the trade ended up gravitating towards that all-time highs key level. For my second trade, as you can see here, this was on Tesla. I ended up taking this trade almost right after the NVDA entry. We recently had earnings, and you can see overall markets are pushing towards the upside, and we end up reclaiming back above this earnings high. So coming into Monday morning, I'm fairly bullish here on Tesla. If you can get above your Friday's highs, potentially you can see a nice push up and towards your 468 and above. If you zoom out a little bit on the higher time frames here now as well, as long as you can maintain above your 447, I'm fairly bullish on Tesla, and I like to see now this push up in towards this key high all the way back from October the 2nd. As you can see, coming to market open, really within the first 10 minutes, really strong buyers stepping in above our previous day highs along with our pre-market highs here as well. This is what my entry looked like here on Tesla. I was actually a little bit more aggressive on this day just because Tesla's personality, sometimes when it likes to run, it doesn't come back for the retest. So a little bit more of an aggressive entry here on Tesla, but ultimately came back down, really held above your pre-market highs, as you can see, which in this case, it is your 459. Came back to retest this 1 minute order block here as well. My stop was fairly tight. It was really just the break above this order block, and we end up trading this nicely back up in towards our 470 and above. This ended up being a super solid trade here on Tesla. This is the one where I made over $10,000 and had over 30% PNL on this ticker. So these are the two trades that I took on Monday. Nothing to write home about. I'm going to share with you the main ones, which is going to be on Wednesday and Thursday, but the first 2 days of the week, I took a few losers, took a few winners. Now let's go on to Tuesday's trades. Now we're on Tuesday, November the 4th. Ended up making $1,800 on this day. Took another 2 trades on this day. Trade number 1 was on Tesla once again, $3,700, and net ROI was only around 14%. So on these days, really just kind of primarily base hits. I didn't have any really higher time frame trades until Wednesday and Thursday of this week. Risked around $1,300 on this trade for a realized R multiple of 2.82, and the setup ended up being a break and retest on the 5-minute time frame, and I ended up taking a losing trade on Apple here. Lost about 13% on this one for a trade risk of around $2,000, and the setup once again was a break and retest on the 5-minute time frame. These are my executions here on Tesla. Now let's go into the charts to see exactly what this looks like. Okay, as you can see, we're on the first trade, which is Apple. Looking back on this trade, I was primarily looking for a potential earnings reversal play back above this 269. As you can see, we have multiple touches here. If you can get back above, potential earnings reversal back towards the upside. So this was the primary thesis here on Apple. And this is the trade setup right here. Looking back on it, it was a 5-minute range retest. There wasn't as much relative strength on this one. Apple's primarily known as a less momentum ticker. So I swear every single time I do trade Apple, it is primarily a loser. So I usually like to avoid Apple. Apple's prone to looking good intraday, but then obviously fake out on the higher time frames. But as you can see, entering here on the 5-minute opening range, looking for that continuation towards the upside. Had some nice pushes, hit high of day, but ultimately failed. And I ended up having a quick stop out for a negative 13% on this day. This is the next day here on Tesla. So this was on Tuesday. We ended up having a nice push up on Monday, and we ended up gapping down here on Tuesday. So for Tesla, this one actually showed some relative strength coming into market open. As you can see, dropped, but then ended up having this really solid push higher. So what I was primarily looking for was the break and retest offer 5-minute range for a potential pushback towards the upside. And this is the trade here on Tesla. You can see nice retest offer 5-minute range, pushed higher, came back down, retested once again. This is where I entered in for a solid push up and towards that 460. Scaled majority of my position up and towards this 460 just based off the context with the cues, and then ended up stopping out the rest of my remaining trailers. So this ended up being a 15% win, very small win here on Tesla. End up losing around 14, 15 15% on Apple, end up sizing a little bit bigger here on Tesla. So end up only making $2,000 on this day. As I mentioned, nothing crazy really happened on Monday and Tuesday. These were primarily just base hit days. Now let's go on to the next day. Now we're on day number 3, which is Wednesday, November the 5th, ended up making $4,700 on this day. Took 2 trades once again. So as you can see, these are my trades right here, and I'm taking 2 trades here on Palantir. End up sizing up for this one just because, in my opinion, this was a higher time frame thesis. I'll show you guys here on the charts in a second. With it being a higher time frame thesis, also recently had earnings as well. Traded 100 contracts for an adjusted cost of around $25,000. End up losing close to 15% on this one. My stop loss was 2.2 on the contracts. End up risking $3,000 on this trade. As I mentioned, this was a higher time frame thesis, so I lost a little bit more than I would have liked to. As for the trade setup, this ended up being a previous day low retest, and of course this ended up being the first trade, which was a loser. But then I ended up taking the exact same trade, which ended up being an 84% rule. Ended up making $8,500 on this one. Similar thing, 100 contracts traded. Ended up making 34% on this one. My trade risk, once again, I was risking another $2,400 for a realized R multiple of 3.56R. As for the setups in themselves, previous day low retest, and then of course this was an 84% rule just because I re-entered on the exact same setup. Now let's go into the charts to see exactly what this looks like. Okay, here we're on Wednesday here, and we're trading Palantir towards the downside. In the past couple of sessions, we ended up having a really solid push up on Palantir, but ultimately we had earnings. We had a little bit of weak guidance, and that's what really dropped Palantir towards the downside. So you can see pretty big gap down lower. Day number 1 consolidation. So day number 2, we're really looking for day 2 continuation towards the downside. Key levels we have marked out, really this 190 along with our previous day lows. What I'm primarily looking for is continuation lower here on Palantir. And these are my 2 trades here on Palantir. The first one, I end up waiting for extra confirmation in this one. As you can see, broke underneath our previous day lows, entered in with a stop just to break above, looking for that push down and towards that 180. End up pulling back up, and I actually ended up stopping up prematurely on this trade just because I didn't like the context with the cues at this time. So that was a mistake that I made on this day, was I stopped out prematurely before hitting my key stop, which was this pivot high at this 186. So I ended up losing $3,000 on the first trade, but I still like the setup just based off the higher time frame. So as you can see, once it got back underneath, I ended up taking this trade once again with the 84% rule, exact same stop, exact same entry as before, looking for this push lower. And then this is the trade that ended up moving nicely on the contracts, end up making around 35% on the second trade, where I end up losing 15% on the first trade. So in this day, ended up making up for it, but it should have been a bigger trade just because I ended up stopping up prematurely. But super solid trade here on Palantir. This ended up being your previous day low retest. If you just zoom out, as you can see, really solid retest right off our previous day lows for this nice continuation down in towards that 181, which was another higher time frame objective. So these are the trades that I ended up taking on Wednesday. Now let's go on to Thursday, which was by far my best trade of the week. As for the last 2 days of the week, I end up combining it together because they're primarily just one single trade, but I end up making $13,000 on Thursday, and I'm making another $3,000 on Friday. This was primarily based off of one single trade, which was NVDA towards the downside. This, in my opinion, was my A+ setup, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like. As you can see, this is the trade right here on NVIDIA. I took the 192.50 puts, $16,000 PNL, 120 contracts traded, adjusted cost was $19,000, ended up being a net ROI of 85% in this case. And you can see I was only risking around $3,000 on this trade, realized R multiple of 6.18. And then for the setups, I ended up taking the previous day low retest, ended up being textbook setup towards the downside. And of course, as you can see, these are my executions, and this ended up being a super solid trade. And of course, as you can see, these are my broker executions as well. As I mentioned, I took the 192.50 puts, entered in right at that 954 candle, end up riding these contracts towards the upside. As you can see, these contracts end up going from $1.60 to intraday $4.20. And of course, I ended up selling some the next day, which the contracts were over $10 a contract. So these end up running around 500+%. And I'm going to show you exactly what I was looking for on the higher time frames. Plus, I'm going to show you the live session for this day here as well. And finally, this ended up being the best trade of the week. So this was NVIDIA later into the week. So earlier we end up having this nice push towards the upside, but ultimately we started to break structure lower and the market started to head lower just based off the sentiment with Palantir earnings earlier into the week. With weak guidance, you can see a lot of the semiconductors started falling. So for NVIDIA, as you can see, the key levels that we had marked out really was this 204. Other key levels we had marked out was this 196 as well. So originally earlier into the week, we're fairly bullish, but ultimately you can see we broke structure, end up using this as a retest on Wednesday. And then coming into Thursday, overall market was weak, plus NVIDIA was showing relative weakness. So on Thursday, we're looking to potentially capture this move towards the downside, retest underneath that 194 for really now just this push towards the downside. So we're looking to capture this move right here. And we understand that if we can break underneath this 194, which is a very key point of interest, we can move fast quickly towards the downside on the overall markets. So that's exactly what the game plan here was on NVIDIA. You can go back and check the pre-market preps if you'd like as well to see the thought process in real time. But basically, this is what the thought process looked like here on the higher time frames. And as you can see, this is the trade that we have here on NVIDIA. What we had was that previous day low retest. As you can see, we had this really nice push towards the downside, had some consolidation here in the pre-market and after hours. Once we're able to break underneath your previous day lows, this was a very key level here on the higher time frame. So all we're looking for was the break, retest, continuation towards the downside. If you go into the 1 minute time frame, we end up getting that retest here on the 1 minute. Exactly where we got in was this candle right here, right at that 954 with a stop just to break above. I personally entered in with 120 contracts, risking just a break above here, looking for this continuation towards the downside. Ultimately scaled along the ways, ended up holding some trailers, and of course we end up gapping down the next day and we end up having super solid continuation lower. So this ended up being a really solid trade, the best trade of the week by far. This ended up being an over 85% net ROI with the trailers that ran the next day, risking around $3,000 to make over $16,000. So ended up being a super solid risk to reward trade. Now let's go on to the live session to see exactly how I executed this trade in real time.
As for some of the names I'm keeping an eye on today, it doesn't seem like NVIDIA is showing a little bit of relative weakness, but yesterday dropped. Overall market dropping here as well. If NVIDIA can get underneath key levels, potentially we can see some more downside here. So we'll keep an eye out on NVIDIA.
So as you can see right here, my game plan coming into today, as I mentioned, a little bit of relative weakness coming into market open. If we can see that break underneath their previous day lows, 195, we can be looking for shorts towards the downside here, really based off of the higher time frames.
NVIDIA actually potentially could be in play for a short if you get underneath your previous day lows. Higher time frame showing a little bit more weakness, potentially retest underneath your previous day lows here. Key level is basically this 195. So if we break underneath, potentially you can be using this level now as a resistance for continuation lower.
So as you can see right there for the overall market, as I mentioned, really longs are off the table for me since Qs are underneath your 621. NVIDIA is actually in play if we can get underneath this 195 for this continuation towards the downside.
Yeah, with the market dropping here, potentially we have room down towards your previous day lows here on the keys. Let's keep an eye on NVIDIA retest. Previous day lows here, 194. If there's weak price action here, if the market does want to drop, right? NVIDIA, keep an eye on this 194 retest. I'll be looking at the 192.50s here on NVIDIA, the 192.50 puts.
As you can see here for the Qs, a little bit of rejection off the 621. Now markets are showing a lot more weakness coming into 10 o'clock. NVIDIA now had that full candle closure underneath that 195. I mentioned now we could be looking for the retest off of our previous day lows. What I'm looking for here is the 192.50 puts.
All right, I'm looking for some sellers to step in here on NVIDIA. Yeah, NVIDIA, I'm gonna try some NVIDIAs here, the 192.50 puts. My risk, basically a break above your previous day highs, right? With the Qs rejecting here as well, like this one for a potential push towards the downside.
So as you can see right here on NVIDIA, as I mentioned, I just got into some of the 192.50 puts. I'm gonna try it here with the Qs relative weakness as well. Basically, the trade is off of your previous day lows. Risk is just a break above this key level. Now I'm looking for a continuation towards the downside to capture that higher time frame thesis.
Let's see if we can get this flush here on NVIDIA with the Qs pushed down towards your previous day lows here. Let's see Qs. Let's see if there's a reaction here off your previous day lows. Another flush here. Scale some more here on NVIDIA. Premium's up nicely now. Contracts about around 40-50%.
So as you can see, it sped up the tape there, but Qs really nice push towards the downside, right down in towards our previous day lows on the Qs, 617. NVIDIA really nice flush after rejecting off its previous day lows. Contracts, as I mentioned, up around 40-50% on the premiums now.
Yeah, we should get the shop here with the Qs. No buyer stepping in so far. Spy underneath your previous day lows here as well.
Yep, as you can see right there, super solid push on NVIDIA right down in towards that 192, up about $1 a con on the 192.50 puts, scaling a decent amount of position down in towards this area.
Right into that 192. Yeah, we're in a good spot now. Scale some 192 next level. Let's see if we can get that Qs and SPY flush down towards low of day here. If we can get that flush, I think we can see NVIDIA down towards 191.50s and potentially 191s here. See if we can get that flush. Here's the flush here on the Qs and SPY. Look at that. Nice, right down towards low of day. Sweet. Yeah, nice pop on the premiums there as well. SPY Qs flush, NVIDIA down towards 191. Should see a bigger flush here if the Qs can drop. All right, look at the premiums pop. $3 a contract now. Good to finally have a nice short position. We haven't shorted the market in a long time because the market's been fairly bullish, but you should get that push down. 191 scale some here, around $3 a contract. 190's next level. Beautiful. Look at that. Right down. Scale some more here. There's that flush we wanted. Look at that.
But yeah, perfect trade towards the downside. You can see Qs, right, came up above our 617, but ultimately got back underneath. For SPY, rejecting off our previous all-time highs key level. NVIDIA, as you can see, a lot more relative weakness as the Qs headed down towards low of day. NVIDIA was already at low of day, so the relative weakness gave us more conviction that I wanted to head towards the downside. And you can see, once it broke low of day, instant flush towards the downside. Huge pop on the premiums, end up being super solid, over 100% on the contracts on this move. And you can see up over 100% contracts on this move. And if I speed up the tape here and fast forward, I end up holding some trailers for a bigger push lower, but another drop on NVIDIA. And of course, I end up holding some contracts overnight, which end up running over 600%. But yeah, that was my live session. Hopefully you guys found some insights off that, my entry, my thought process, and kind of what I was looking for coming into this session and how I executed this. And with that being said, I hope you guys did enjoy that video. If you did, appreciate if you guys drop a like and sub. And with that being said, I'll see you guys next week for a brand new video. Peace.